Good morning, Tampa Bay. This is John Dingfelder, and you're listening to Down and Dirty on WMNF 88.5. I hope everybody's having a great day and a great Friday and looking forward to a nice weekend. I don't even know if it's going to rain or not. I haven't had a chance to look. But anyway, we are so glad you've tuned in. And without further ado, let me tell you a little bit about this show, Down and Dirty. If you haven't been listening over the last year or so, we like to get into, I think, important issues that are going on around Tampa Bay. And a very important issue that affects pretty much everybody and thousands of folks individually is the homeless issue. And that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. With a couple of good friends, one very good old friend, Captain. There you go, Chief of Staff, Mayor of Tampa's Chief of Staff, John Bennett. Welcome, John Bennett.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here.
How you doing?
Doing wonderful. We really appreciate the topic and the time.
Good. And we also have Maggie
Rogers.
Maggie's with Catholic Charities. Which I believe is across the entire Bay. Is that right?
Yep. Diocese of St. Petersburg. We cover 5 counties.
And we're so glad you could join us this morning. And I know, Maggie, before the show started, we were talking about all the different things that Catholic Charities does, and you're the CEO of it. We'll have you back on to talk about some of the other programs you have. But one of your big issues is homeless, right?
Yes. We have 5 shelters.
Yeah. So, well, let's go back to homeless. I mean, do we have homeless? I guess we'll just focus on Hillsborough County for today. But do we have homeless in the entire Bay Area?
I think that you see that. I think you see just going outside, driving to work, driving home. I think you see the evidence of homeless on the street.
And I know that in dealing with what's that organization, Hillsborough,
Tampa Hillsborough Homeless Initiative, THHI,
right, which is another nonprofit. We're going to have them on as well today. But they do an annual count. Is that part of a federal requirement or something like that?
Yes.
And
every continuum of care does one across the country.
And what is that count looking like over the last couple of years? Are we going up or down in Hillsborough County?
Well, I think there's 2 data sets there. There's the official data set that comes out from the point-in-time count, as Maggie mentioned. And then what I look to is what I call the tactical count. How many calls for service are we getting in this area of homelessness, whether it's public safety calls, medical calls, et cetera. And so we've been tracking that on a quarterly basis in the city to see what the ground truth looks like. And of course, calls don't necessarily mean belly buttons. Every call isn't one unique person. Could be 5 calls for one person over 90 days. So, it's not a point in time count as by individual, but it is an analysis of the energetics that are in the field.
Well, how do those two
reconcile?
Yeah, and why?
Well, again, I don't want to get into the statistical methodology of the point in time count that.
But it's early in the morning. You might put us to sleep if you did, John. But go ahead.
Yeah, I'll try not to do that.
Tease you.
Yeah, well, and I'm used to that from you. But whatever their methodology is to get their official count, the argument so far is that it is going down.
That's the other count.
Yes, and the energy that we see in the field could be driven by the fact that government is putting more resources out there, so the calls may increase because they think we have opportunity for placement in the continuum of care. So we just look at the numbers that we're using to serve the community, which have gone up.
Okay, so you've got crossing graphs, I guess.
Correct.
With theirs going allegedly down and yours going up. I recall that the THHI graph was showing an uptick. I can't remember if it was during COVID or right, was that right? It was showing upward trend for a while.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to take notice that the point in time count is just that. It's a point in time. It's one day. It's 24 hours. And so it's not it may not be the best reflection of the entire year. and a lot of our donors and supporters, as well as just our calls for service, those are increasing. And I think, and our donors alone are like, well, if the numbers are going down, why do I see so many more people outside than I used to? I don't know that I have that answer.
Well, that leads to my next question, which is, what are the top causes of homelessness? Before you respond, let me go ahead and invite people to participate. We won't take your calls probably for about 5 or 10 more minutes. But the call-in number is 813-239-9663. And we welcome your participation in this very interesting and important topic. Maggie, from your perspective, your history, what are some of the causes? And John, how are you fixing those causes single-handedly?
Right. Such a broad array of issues. It might be lack of family connection. Mental health is certainly high on the list. Drug addiction, substance abuse addiction, affordable housing or lack thereof, not enough access to housing.
Yeah, so some of them are just straight economic, poverty, low wages, unemployment, and affordable housing, things that perhaps government can do a good or better job of addressing some of the issues that are a little more intransigent, like mental health and substance abuse, or are more difficult because there's many of them are lifelong issues, right?
Right.
John, I always think of you as sort of a Superman kind of guy. So how do you fix those economic issues?
I call Maggie. No. And so let me back up a little bit on the data. So when this administration kicked off in 2019,
this being
the Mayor Castor's administration, I started this analysis on a quarterly basis, and just in the law enforcement sector, we were averaging 1,500 calls every 90 days, citywide.
6,000 a year.
Yeah, so citywide actually double that. So 1,500 a quarter. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
Don't wrestle with the math teacher.
The math teacher, yeah. I'm reversing that a little bit. So 1,500 a quarter. We're now at 2,000 a quarter. And so, again, are people calling because they think we have more resources, because the mayor and city council have supported opportunities for...
Give me an example of 4 or 5 different types of calls. There's a guy in the street and he's bothering people, right?
Yeah. So, most often it's some sort of minor disorder. I mean, the critical mass of the calls are either trespassing in a kind of a densified area like Ybor City, downtown, or panhandling in an intersection. But we also, they also become victims. I mean, they're subject to the elements overnight. We have a high amount of medical calls, and that's what we're trying to do, is take pressure off the expensive system of the emergency room, the mental health clinic, and potentially the jail system by making sure people are placed in a continuum of care that has all the wraparound services.
But I know from your perspective, John, and I'm going to presume Mayor Castor as well, there's also the humanity of it, the humane side of it. And John, you and I go way back, and I asked you if I could ask you about this story. But you know what? You handle 100 different issues a day as the mayor's chief of staff, from soup to nuts. But I got to say, this issue always seems to hit a little closer to home with you. And do you want to tell us why?
Well, as a young man who was disrupted in a family life, I've slept in a car.
At the age of,
7, 8, 9. And a lot of these
your parents had split up.
They did,
and you were with your dad, and
I was, and he was an interesting person, and
you said a brilliant man.
He was an aerospace engineer, but sometimes the brilliance didn't add up to the lifestyle, and so I went to 12 schools in 12 years, and a lot of disruption. So, it was important to me in my professional and personal life to have the eyes to see people that don't have stability. Mm-hmm. And whether they're lonely or they're on the street, I enjoy looking a homeless person in the eye or a houseless person in the eye every day and finding out their story, and then seeing what path we can do. Can we reunify them with family, as Maggie said earlier, is one of the problems.
But I wonder if that background of yours, personal background of yours, might have just led you into, I didn't say law enforcement. You were with Tampa Police Department for 25 years or 30 years and worked your way all the way up to deputy chief, I think.
Assistant chief, yeah.
But I wonder if it led you into law enforcement to help people right from the beginning.
It may have. I mean, I was, working 3 jobs and going to USF at night when they had a recruiting opportunity, and it just seemed like a good fit. And I was blessed to have the job and the career. And I can tell you, 10 years ago, as an assistant chief, the mayor, who was then the chief, allowed me to put the first homeless outreach officer in place,
nice.
Dan McDonald. And he hit the street, and he was the bridging agent between the police department and the social services.
And now how big is that unit across all departments?
Well,
right?
we have non-sworn outreach, and we still have sworn outreach. So there's a handful of officers at TPD that do it. And then there's a few non-sworn staff that are working in our housing and community development space.
I love the fact that you have these type of specialty officers, because all the officers, I'm sure, are trained, in dealing with the homeless and the unique issues there and all. But those folks, those handpicked folks, would have extra specialty that kind of like the mental health officers that I think you and I worked together on before I left council to address those types of things. Of course, there's a lot of overlap. Maggie, you do such good work in so many different ways across the entire Bay Area, but tell us a little bit about yourself. John and I have this commonality with New Jersey boys. But how about you? Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up in just north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
My background's in corrections. I moved here about 22 years ago.
Pittsburgh, that was kind of where Trump was shot at, near that area.
Yes, not far.
Yeah.
And when I moved here, changed careers and got into social services and was overseeing shelters for many years and had the opportunity, was asked by the former Catholic Charities president of the board to move over to Catholic Charities. And I made that move almost 11 years ago. And
wow.
Was a director of just my job then was just to bring services to Hillsborough County. That was my only role. And flash forward, became the executive director and have been doing that since 2018. And John and I met. He is familiar with Pinellas Hope, which is probably our most known homeless shelter.
And that's been going on a long time.
Almost 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he was familiar with that. And, flash forward to March of 2020 when I was just asked, in your opinion, do you have any services you could whip up quickly because everything is closing because of COVID? I was asked by another colleague of mine in the city, and I said, let's do a mock Pinellas Hope. And
now, when you say COVID, things were closing, what, did Metropolitan Ministries have to close down and that sort of thing?
Right, services
I didn't remember that.
Right,
yeah.
Services were being limited. A lot of other nonprofits were not going to be providing those services, and so the city wanted to know, do you have any, if somebody wants to access, restrooms, laundry, showers, do you have any ideas? And I said, yeah, let's do a trial Pinellas Hope model on Florida Avenue. And so we did it. We were open. We were supposed to be open for 30 days. The mayor graciously extended us another 30 days. And during those 60 days, we had 210 homeless go through the program. 97 moved to permanent housing.
Oh.
And, after those two months, she said, well, I think you know what you're doing on homeless services. Let's do this on a permanent basis. And so we spent the next year and a half or so looking for our permanent home.
And that can always be a challenge because no, quote, neighborhood,
right,
wants a homeless or home, what do you call it now? House challenged, or what's the word? Isn't there some other word?
Well, I hear a lot about houseless.
Houseless.
Yeah.
So anyway, nobody wants that type of village near their home, near their neighborhood. So what did you do to find something, John?
Well, it was interesting because the balance is the not in my backyard versus access to transportation to be able to get into the workforce, get to doctor's visits, do whatever you need to do for mobility.
Sure.
So trying to find something on the fringe of a neighborhood / light industrial is
you could put them all the way out in Keystone or something, on a cow pasture, but
sure,
that's not going to help them be that isolated.
Yeah, and I was very familiar with Pinellas Hope because, I spent a couple years over there in that public safety role and social service role.
I forgot about that transgression across the bay there.
Yeah. But, it was a good background to see how Pinellas Hope matured, and it was in a quasi-industrial area. And so we really were fortunate to find this parcel out in the eastern side of the city, and it seems to work well so far.
So this one is located 37th, I think 37th 100 block and 3rd Avenue, which is out on the east side of Ybor toward Brandon in an industrial area. And I think that's the key, right? You put it in an industrial area, at least you're not going to get those homeowners squawking.
I probably turned down close to 30 locations. I mean, between the city's real estate department as well as mine, we looked and looked and looked, and I would see a property. I was like, no, too close to a school, no, too close to homes, no, not close enough to transportation. I mean, there were a multitude of reasons, and finally we landed where we are.
Now you started out there again with tents, tents on platforms, I think.
Yep.
And how many units was that, and when was that?
Right, so March 13th.
And by the way, let me remind people, if you want to join the conversation, we will take your calls. We're glad to take your calls, 813-239-9663.
So we started December of 21. We opened with 100 tents that are up on platforms, and each tent has a mattress inside.
Is that just for one person?
One person. We put one person in each. And then we expanded to 125 tents up on platforms. Now we have 99 cottages in place. And so each of those cottages that are developed by the Pallet company houses one person. We have 10 cottages that are made for 2 people.
One of the last things I remember, John, before I left City Council, was you took me up to see one of those cottages that was brought in, I think, as a demo up there at that Catholic
Sacred Heart
on Florida.
We walked through it and kicked the tires a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it that type of unit?
It is exactly that unit. 64 square feet.
Yeah.
But climate controlled and, again, out of the elements. And it also provides a matriculation within the campus. You heard Maggie talk about Pinellas Hope. The exciting thing there is not only the wraparound services, but you can go from a tent to a cottage to an apartment right on the same campus. And so, obviously trying to figure out how to expand. I mean, even an
apartment.
Yeah.
Wow.
Even the most conservative numbers say that we're probably dealing with 4,800 folks in this situation that have been in Tampa for X amount of time. And Maggie has a good triage to make sure that folks really are coming from the city, since the city and city council and our public are helping support this opportunity.
So I'm sure we'd all like to say it was smooth sailing to just get that property and put this all together, and you did it in a week and what have you. But I did read that article in the Times, and it spoke to the fact that it was opened a little bit behind schedule. I guess there are electrical issues and other sort of things like that.
I think it's just the typical delays with construction. It was a multitude of things. One, we are doing something that isn't traditionally done. So it's new. It's new to us. It's new to the city of Tampa, as well as...
you still had to get your standard city permits.
Right, absolutely.
And John couldn't lube that adequately.
Well, we nudge as much as possible, but the city knows that...
No, it's a safety issue.
Yeah, when this project is... and again... everything comes down to relationships. I mean, I think the mayor helped with some of the things with TICO.
TICO, that's right.
So, all these relationships that we've built over 40 years of working in the city really come to fruition on something like that.
And also, we were building the infrastructure for long term. And so, that property right now it's just under 6 acres. It only has one building on it. And that current building houses the staff. It's storage. It's where the clients eat. It's the computer room. It's the learning lab.
Is that a new building or an existing building?
It was the only existing building there.
Okay.
And so
you have room to grow there?
We do. And so when we were building the infrastructure for those 100 cottages, we were also bringing in the infrastructure for everything else, our overall plan.
Right,
and so
looking to the future.
We're bringing in electric to have 200 cottages, not just the 100 that are there. We're bringing in the utilities to have other buildings. And so the process was long, but it's because we plan to do so much there.
So let's talk about you're not just housing folks and then sending them out on the street, to go fend for yourself and come back for a meal. You're actually offering wraparound services.
So
right?
I like to say that Pinellas Hope and Tampa Hope are, call us the orchestra conductor. We keep the wheels moving every day, but it's really our partners that come to Tampa Hope. They play their instrument. If it were not for our partners, the success would not be nearly as high.
Give me a couple examples, partners.
It's from everything from other parishes, not necessarily just Catholic parishes, but a lot of other churches, non-denominational, come to Tampa Hope. They provide meals. It is our other partners in the community that are coming to provide mental health services. USF Street Medicine comes on the weekends to provide medical care. It's those wraparound services. It's our other housing partners that are coming in.
How about Veterans Affairs?
Absolutely. They come as well. We're now in the process of working towards setting aside cottages for veterans. I mean, we have a lot of programs but it's because of our partnerships that come to Tampa Hope that make Tampa Hope successful. Traditionally, emergency shelters, their success rate is around 30%. We are getting close to 50%.
Wow.
So we're just over 40, and I think we can get to 50%. And I used to tell the mayor when we were looking for this project, it's really go big or go home. I could buy several houses and I could rehouse 20 or so people a year, and you'll give me a high five. You'll say, great job.
Because Catholic Charities, you do some of that also.
We do. But I wanted to go big. I want you to see the impact on the streets. And so when I say to you, I have 234 homeless on a campus every single night, that's noticeable. But when I also say that since we've opened, I've put 400 people into apartments since December of 21, that's also something that you can...
Let's put those numbers, put those numbers into context. The point in time numbers that I saw from a few years ago anyway was like 1,500 folks. I always thought it sounded a little low, but all across Hillsborough County. So volunteers go out and they literally interview people, interview people all over the county, try and find those encampments and that sort of thing. And I think the numbers that I remember seeing was somewhere in between 1,000, 2,000. So if you're impacting in a positive way, 300 or 400 like that, that seems pretty good. I mean, 25%.
Well, I think it's even more unique than that because, they have brought in over 1,000. And housed, obviously, the number Maggie just talked about. Mm-hmm. But I think the thing that really excited us from the Pinellas Hope model, once it matured, their average life cycle of getting someone through the triage process was like 88 days. And I want to go back and say that not only did the pilot pop-up program of 100 tents during COVID work to help shelter in place the community, especially the houseless community, but I think, and Maggie can verify this, between Pinellas Hope, which pre-existed, and Tampa Hope being an outdoor system, we had 0 COVID cases.
No.
Yeah.
I was wondering, and perhaps it's an obvious answer to a question, was about longevity. You say you're approaching your goal, maybe perhaps is 50, 60% success. I'm curious how you define success, and also in terms of, are you looking at this in terms of longevity study? Do you follow up with these same folks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later and see, are we still succeeding?
Right. We don't stay in touch with them 3, 4, 5, 6 years later. We do follow up after they leave for a short period of time, and they also know how to find us. So they call us when they're struggling or they need help, and they also have the opportunity to access our other resources, our rent and utility assistance programs.
It would seem to be interesting and valuable to know long-term how they're doing.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Because, I don't want to be demeaning or anything, but is it just a short-term Band-Aid of a year or two? or is this a long-term fix to a better life?
I'm asked that question often, and I always say if somebody is in an apartment, regardless if they're here for 1 year or 10 years, I think it's successful, because if I kept them off the streets for 365 days, I think we did a good job.
Sure.
I think that, the staff time is really about the resources to have the staff time to dedicate to follow up to those thousands of people that we've served. And between our two shelters, that's what it comes down to. We're serving thousands of people a year. I mean, Catholic Charities alone last year served almost 22,000 people in our programs.
So if you're just tuning in, this is WMNF. Our show is Down and Dirty. We're on for about another half hour. We're talking about the homeless or houseless folks in the Bay Area, and specifically in Hillsborough County. We've got John Bennett with the City of Tampa, Chief of Staff under Mayor Castor, and Maggie Rogers, who's the CEO of Catholic Charities Bay Area wide. We're glad to have you guys. The phone number to call in is 813-239-9663. Have you had homeless issues? Do you have relatives or friends who've been homeless? And what are your thoughts and questions about that? I came across a website, I don't remember whose it was, last night when I was doing my last minute prepping for the show. And it talks about some of the myths, M-Y-T-H-S, not an easy word to say, the myths of homelessness. And I wanted you guys to speak to that a little bit, because I think we do hear these. There's a lot of just like, oh, those people. You know what I mean? And so let me run through a couple of them. Folks are homeless by choice. Maggie shaking her head adamantly.
No, they are not homeless by choice.
Yeah.
There's a multitude of reasons why they're homeless, but generally they are extremely grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, and that's not an easy life out there, right, John? I mean, you've seen it up close and personal as an officer and as a city official. Why would you do it by choice?
Well, I think people may gravitate into situations that, based on their economic opportunities or lack thereof, could be relative. Example, I was talking to one gentleman on the bus mall, and he was in his 70s, and he was on Social Security, and his subsidized rent in the neighborhood that he grew up in, went to high school with, so we're talking decades, was only $300 a month. And when he got displaced with subsidized housing up to the north end, up on Fletcher, it over doubled to $700. So I got the math right on that, right, John? So he said he'd rather live off his $900 on the street than to spend $700 and be close to his old neighborhood, where all his friends and family may be. But nobody else took him in either, and I think that's also
it's complicated.
It is, yeah. But he had no substance issues, no mental health issues. His was strictly economic. So whether you call that choice to live for $700 with little discretionary money for food and all the other items, utilities, or I can make it on the street and keep my $900 a month and bounce around every day in a moderate climate most of the time.
Yeah. All right, we've got a couple of calls. Let's grab them. We have Marley, I'm not sure, in Tampa. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Is that Marlo?
Yes, this is Marlo.
Hey, good morning. What's going on? What do you think about this issue?
I realize how bad it is, but I have a specific issue. I work with the Department of Juvenile Justice, and unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of mechanisms to help people that are homeless, and we're seeing a lot of that in now that we never had before. However, I have a family of 7, 6 children and a mother who are homeless, and I have tried to give them all of the information that we have. I've given them Catholic Charities. I've given them Metropolitan, and they're still living on the streets. They're living out of a car, actually. And I just wondered if you could maybe point me in a direction so I can help them.
And Marla, we appreciate the call, and we'll get Maggie to chime in on this, but that's a very precarious situation to be in, because the other branch of government, DCF, could see that situation and possibly take the children from the mother,
Exactly.
even though she's trying her best. So let me see if Maggie or John has a suggestion for you, and thanks for calling.
Yeah, you're definitely on the right track on the resources to refer them to. In Hillsborough County, the continuum of care utilizes the coordinated entry process, and so it is usually based on acuity and need. And so whenever you're referring to other agencies, those agencies that are receiving funding are required to put them through this system.
So where does this lady need to call? What would you think?
What I was going to say is offline. I'm guessing that you have your phone number, and I could have one of my supervisors or managers reach out to them directly and kind of give them the step-by-step on how to help maybe move the process a little faster.
So should he try and call your office and follow up on this call?
Yeah, if he could leave his number with one of your staff, that would be wonderful, and I'll have one of my staff follow up with him.
Great, I greatly appreciate that.
All right, Marla, call back in. If I hang up on you, call back in and give Eileen your number, okay?
Just straight from the number I'm calling from?
The same number you just called in at, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
All right, we've got Bob from St. Petersburg. Bob?
Hi.
Hey.
I appreciate you taking my call.
Absolutely.
I worked with the homeless for a while. Mainly, I had a Thursday night feed where I took food out to the homeless. And what I noticed is there's a certain number or a minority of homeless people that can't adhere to simple rules, like don't bring alcohol into a center, or don't bring drugs into a center, things like that. What kind of help do you have for people like that?
And not only what kind of help, but how do they enforce their own rules? Because I'm sure there's some meaningful rules in the Tampa Hope project. Maggie?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll start out on that, and I can tell you that some jurisdictions within the footprint we're talking about, the 5-county footprint, and I'll give Sheriff Bob Guattari credit for having what's called Safe Harbor, which is kind of a wet site as a diversionary process from the jail system. And so, the one thing that's been great about Catholic Charities is that, to gain entry into there's very limited situations where you wouldn't get access. And so they're very benevolent, very forgiving on that. But again, the sheriff's office in Pinellas, and I think other jurisdictions are working to understand that, we need to have people off the street and give them wraparound services in all these different conditions. So it's a work in progress. I think there's a growing need for it, of course. But I celebrate those ones that are getting ahead of it, and I'm sure Maggie has some thoughts.
So Maggie, what do you do when somebody comes in and they insist on bringing that little flask with them?
They're not allowed to bring it onto the property. Yeah. No, they can't. We do bag checks on everyone that comes in, so we don't allow drugs or alcohol onto the property. Now, if they do come back and it's clear that they have been out drinking, it's really then a safety call. So we staff at the front desk are trained to say, okay, well, this person could come in and will be safe to themselves as well as to others. And then we'll have a conversation with case management and then the next day to see how we're going to handle the situation and how we can provide services and help them. If they do come in and they are a handful and we can't manage them, then they will be asked to leave.
Mm-hmm. Is there TPD on site
No.
for general security among a couple hundred people?
No, they secure themselves. I mean, this is a place where they want to feel safe. They want to be there. They're not required to be there. They want to be there. And so we used to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for security at Pinellas Hope. And several years ago, we started to decline the number of hours that we had security there and essentially have eliminated it now and found that we have no more incidents because we don't have security, and so we do not have security at Tampa Hope.
Well, Bob, we appreciate your call and thanks for listening. All right, let's jump back to some of the other myths about homeless. Let's see. There's there's a notion that people come to Tampa for the weather. I saw a statistic rebutting that, which was kind of interesting. It said that one of the studies showed that 75% of the folks who were shown on the point in time survey were already living here. They just fell on hard times or had a relapse with their drug or alcohol issues or their mental health issues and that sort of thing. But 75% are already in Hillsborough County at least 1 year prior to being identified as homeless. So does that surprise you at all, or?
No, I'd actually think that the percentage would be higher.
Yeah.
I think we do a pretty good...
So it's not a Chamber of Commerce thing where, it's like, come to Tampa and live on our streets.
No, I don't think so. At Tampa Hope, we partner with the City of Tampa outreach team and Tampa Police Department's outreach team, and then Catholic Charities has their own outreach team. And the only way to get into Tampa Hope is through outreach. And we do that for a multitude of reasons. One, we don't want to have just a plethora of homeless showing up and waiting outside the gate to do intake. We want to make sure that we're strategic and we're bringing those in that we know are homeless in the city of Tampa. And the majority of those that have been homeless in the city of Tampa for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. There's another... perhaps common sentiment. It's like, those are just drug addicts and alcoholics. We don't need to necessarily bother with them or what have you. The response I saw online on that one said that in the majority of cases, I can't remember the percentage, that the addiction might have arisen after they got out on the street just to kind of cope with their predicament. John?
Well, I think it goes back to the calls for service. Looking into one bucket of 1,500 to 2,000 calls for, certain issues across 90 days, there's a whole medical component to that too. And so whether they became homeless is because there was some substance involved or substance is a coping mechanism we can only look at the results. And that's why we go back to having everybody on one campus. Catholic Charities, City of Tampa, and some partners are looking now to have medical respite. They already have it in Pinellas. And so actually today we're trying to further our opportunities with USF Health and maybe Tampa General, where a lot of these clients go to or end up coming from.
And like you said, that's often a very expensive proposition for the providers.
Right.
The emergency room is the last place we want to see folks.
Right. And when our fire department ends up with 88 to 90,000 medical calls a year, if we can take this off of their load and have, opportunities right on campus, that's ideal. So
I think Obamacare was a big help to the system, for people who could actually, get their paperwork together and have Obamacare. But Hillsborough County, I recall Phyllis Buzansky years ago put in a Hillsborough County health system itself that predated Obamacare, right? Does that still exist?
Yes, yeah. And what we find is that, unfortunately, because Tampa Hope does not yet have a medical respite program and we don't have nurses or doctors there daily for an extended period of time anyways, they use the 911 in the emergency rooms as their primary care doctor. So it's I stubbed my toe, I have to go to the hospital. I've had back pain, I have to go to the hospital.
But if we can get them on this Hillsborough County health care plan, I don't remember the name of it exactly, then that would, I think, save a lot of people money because you get more preventive and small injury type of medicine. Listen, we've got Mary in Dunedin has been very patient. Mary, you're on the air.
Hi, honey. Yeah, I was homeless for about 2.5 years. My landlords threw me out because their son died they owned the property. And I was recovering from breast cancer. They were like, well, you should be over your treatment by now. I said, yeah, and your son should have been too, but it came back and he died. It happened. But they threw me on the street, and I hadn't been working because of cancer and COVID at the same time. And I was on the street 2.5 years in my car with my dog.
Oh, boy.
And I think it did real well. Everybody was real kind. And
what side of the bay are you married? Are you in Hillsborough?
Clearwater.
Clearwater.
My sister was homeless in Arkansas through her health issues, and she came down for us to be homeless together. We got in Pinellas Hope, and Catholic Charities got us a place in Dunedin.
Oh, wow. Isn't that a wonderful success story? How's it going now?
Well, I mean, we're older and we have a few health problems, but I'm ready to go back to work.
Well, good for you. And you got a roof over your head?
I do, and a bathroom and a kitchen and walls and stuff and an air conditioner. And, it's just, life is good as far as I'm concerned.
That's great.
I just always look on the brighter side and know there's help and try to help those I can. And a good friend just died that was a friend to the station, Sue Espriellis, and she asked in lieu of flowers that people help the homeless.
So, Mary, we were talking about some of the, myths or fallacies, rumors that go on about, people who end up on the street. I don't know if you were listening to that part of the conversation, but, you weren't just homeless out there by yourself. You were running into other people who were in similar situations.
Most people had health issues or something crazy had happened. That they lost their jobs. They ended up out on the street. And now there were a lot of junkies out there, and they just went to the hospital,
Yeah. And how about safety, personal safety? That had to be an issue as well.
I'm never afraid. Well, I'm not afraid.
Oh, good for you.
Now that I beat cancer, nothing scares me.
Mary, we appreciate your call. We appreciate your telling us about your story, a wonderful success story. You put smiles on the faces in this room and hopefully all across the Bay Area that there is hope for this serious problem.
Yes, and, there's so many people out there trying to help, and people just don't know where to look for it.
Absolutely, and we're going to give them some phone numbers and emails and websites to contact in a few minutes. Mary, have a great day.
You too. Be blessed.
John, I think that's an important point that Maggie can share is it's not just getting through the continuum of care and having the wraparound services and getting permanent sustainable housing or permanent supported sustainable housing, et cetera. But, Maggie also leads them to the workforce. And so proximity to transportation to go to work.
Well, it's funny, John. My next myth was the fact that, hey, get a job. Right? And then it's like, I'm not giving you $1 at the corner. Get a job. And it's not so easy. Why?
Yeah. What I was thinking whenever she was speaking was that sometimes it's the snowball effect. And so one thing leads to 16 other things. And so someone gets sick and then they're not able to work and their work doesn't have long-term, benefits. And so then they lose their job. And then they lose their home, and then they're on the street. But then when they're on the street,
they might not have transportation.
They might not have transportation, and then they lose their ID, and they lose their birth certificate, and then you've got this snowball of things that they need our help with.
And then they're dirty, and they're going to show up to a job interview.
Exactly. So it's really starting at the beginning when you come into one of our facilities is what do you need to get here? You start out here. How do we get you to the top? How do we get you to be self-sufficient? And so it's really moving them in and like, okay, you lost your ID, you lost your birth certificate, to start there. And so it's not always a quick fix. It's not just get them in, get them out.
One of the fascinating things I saw on the website, somebody's website, was the expungement program, I guess, working with the court system for, to when somebody gets arrested. John, you know more than I do on this, but somebody gets arrested, that arrest might stay on their record, which might hurt them, even if they never got convicted. Right. And I think that somebody's helping them through the court system, getting those arrest records expunged so they don't penalize them when they look for a job and have a background check.
And, that leads to where are we at with the strategic goals of what we're doing in the Tampa Bay area, specifically in the city, under Mayor Castor's leadership and with tremendous support from City Council. All members have supported this process and the continuum of care as it relates to Tampa Hope. But what happens in the courtroom space? We have veterans court, we have drug court. One of the goals for us is to come together and have homeless court. And because it's not a crime to be homeless, we just need to get you on the right path. And so how do we get the community involved to slow down the silo services and get them into the campus services? And then how do we divert folks from the emergency room, the jail, and mental health facilities by being preventative on scene?
Take a load off of one side. Might have to put a little more effort on the other side, but working as a team, it seems to be working. All right, we've got a lot of calls today. Let's hear from Leela in Brandon. Leela, you're on the air. Good morning.
Yes, I just wanted to congratulate Maggie. I know her from one of the committees we serve on, and as a long-term person in the Hillsborough County area that has served the homeless, I'm so proud that she's gotten that many people into housing. That's
Thank you.
phenomenal. And Maggie, you're doing a great job. And also the police chief, and if we could somehow convince the city to let us have that parking lot at Morgan Street. I fed 70 people down there last night. And I still am asking the Encore Project, come up with some money to buy this. I think it's owned by the city. And that would make a great, great location to do the tiny houses.
They probably have to decide if they want to put a high-speed rail station there or something else. Leela, we appreciate all you do. I think you've called in before, and thanks for your help with the homeless. Thanks for your call.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Phil and Pinellas, you've been waiting patiently on the air. You are on the air. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Hello, Tampa Bay. Yeah, it's actually Bill, and I'm from Pinellas, but I'm currently up in Jacksonville.
Wow.
I have lived, and I am familiar with many, if not all, of the homeless and various outreach programs in Pinellas County, not as familiar with Hillsborough, as well as I've been on the streets in Jacksonville. I and my dog, Patience, she's lived with me homeless on the streets all her life. And I became homeless. I was convicted of an aggravated battery in 2007. I was charged and convicted in 2009. I did 2 years, and I was acquitted. I was wrongfully imprisoned and emergency released from prison. I got out, had one job working on board ships, but the boat got hauled out. I ended up on the streets at that point and lived on the streets in Pinellas for about 12 years.
Wow.
And then about 4 years up here in Duval County, downtown Duval, and downtown Jacksonville, as well as... Is
the criminal issue...
Okay, now
did that get in the way of jobs and housing?
I'll tell you, that is a whole other program, but I am, and I have voted. I actually have voted since I've been registered Republican since 18. I ran for State House in Pinellas back in 2003. I have never missed an election except when I was in prison. And when I was released, I re-registered in Pinellas, and I have voted there. And when I moved to Duval, I re-registered. This is post-conviction, post-imprisonment, wrongful imprisonment.
All right, but Bill, my question real quick is, are you familiar with the expungement process, and have you taken advantage of it?
Now, like I say, this is a whole other program.
All right, I'm sorry, I lost him. All right, our last call, I think, of the day is going to be Stephen in St. Petersburg, and we'll try and get Bill back, at least if not today, we'll get him on another day. Stephen in St. Pete.
Yeah, I've heard from different groups and politicians and everything that $20 billion would get rid of homelessness by building public.
How much?
$20 billion.
Nationally, $20 billion?
Yeah, would get rid of homeless.
Would get rid of it, okay.
Right. Mississippi, with a conservative government, they said, we got to get rid of the homeless, and they just started building public housing. Now, the primary health care program is really good. I think if you make less than $13,000-14,000 a year, you can get on that, which is a really good health care program.
Mm-hmm.
But neither party, the political duopoly in America, will address homelessness. Now, one thing that would help is universal health care, universal dental care, a living wage, free college tuition, and you get people the medical treatment that they need if it's an alcohol or drug problem. But simply, 60% of the homeless work.
Well, you got to, it brings to mind, I guess, Scandinavia, where I think they do a much better job on all the social problems. My guess is they probably don't have much of a homeless issue in addition to it being very, very cold. Stephen, we're sort of running out of time.
Okay.
But I appreciate your call and your comments. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, we got a couple minutes left. Let's talk about what folks out there in cyberspace or wherever we are can do to help, to get involved. Because this isn't just John and Maggie and your teams solving this. As you said, there's lots of other agencies and individuals who are involved. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about the homeless issue in Tampa Bay area, and specifically in the Hillsborough County. Maggie, your thoughts on how people can get involved?
Well, I'm definitely going to advocate for Catholic Charities. So I say you get on the ccdosp.org website.
Say that again.
ccdosp.org.
That's Catholic Charities.
Diocese of St. Petersburg.
Diocese of St. Petersburg. Okay.
Yeah, and donate through there to help us continue our work.
So folks can just straight up donate their money, and I'm sure that would be well used. What percentage of that donation goes to administrative costs versus directly to helping the homeless?
Right. 91 cents of every dollar goes directly to services.
Right, so only 9% for administrative costs.
Yep.
I'm sure that sends you way up on the top of that chart.
It is. It does. It sends us very high.
Yeah. How about individuals? Somebody's middle class or whatever. But Mary earlier, she said she wants to help. Now that she's back on her feet.
Tampa Hope and Pinellas Hope both are always in need of toiletries. New sheets, blankets, towels, washcloths, and then the normal everyday toiletries: shampoo, toothpaste, deodorant.
Now, how about hands-on volunteers? Is that something that you use at Tampa Hope?
At both places, yes. They can come. They can serve a meal. They can help us around the property. Absolutely.
And how would they get in touch with you to do that?
Still, best way is go to our website, and it'll give them all the information on it, and click a button, and they'll be able to reach out to somebody at Tampa Hope.
Tampa Hope is also on the city website, isn't it, John?
It is.
With a link or something?
They are, and we also list other resources because what we're dealing with at Tampa Hope are mostly singles, but there's also families and other unique populations that are suffering from this issue.
Yeah. Like I said, if you're just tuning in, we've been talking for the last hour about the homeless. We've called it a crisis in the past. Do you feel that we're still at a crisis level, or are we maybe a little more stabilized, Maggie?
I would say it's still at a crisis level. I think just, affordable housing is not that affordable when we have the majority of our clients that are making $982 a month, but they're trying to get an apartment that is $1,400 a month. The math doesn't work out.
Yeah, affordable housing. I've been discussing that, John, on this show many times over the last year, and there's so many different angles and aspects to it. And I know the city, the city is trying its best to address that. We haven't even talked about Hillsborough County and the county government. Are they involved in all of this?
They are, and I want to credit Sheriff Chronister because he has an outreach team that works well, and we're trying to.
Because there are encampments. I saw the little map, and it showed the obvious density is downtown, Ybor City, up Florida Avenue toward me in Seminole Heights, but also there's out suburban there toward the airport, Hillsborough Avenue out there toward the airport, and then out in Brandon. So it's places that maybe are a little more surprising, right?
There are. Those encampments are really everywhere at this point, and we try and do a good job to be proactive and get people to services as much as possible.
Real quick. The Supreme Court comes out and says that local governments and police forces and that sort of thing can chase people off of their encampments and basically sounds like arrest them. Are you going to do that, John?
Well, we're not interested in arresting homeless. We're interested in giving services. And so that outreach is the bridge between the emergency services and the housing opportunities. So we're going to continue with that.
All right. You've been listening to WMNF. This is Down and Dirty. The next show up is Mitch Perry Ray. And Ben, you over there? Yeah, he's over there. So they've got the skinny coming on. We've enjoyed talking to John Bennett and Maggie Rogers about the homeless issue, and we look forward to you joining us next week.
Live from NPR.